Questions for red index cards, the green are for the candidate form that's starting right now. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I said this last time and guess his cell phone went off. March. Okay, let's all turn our cell phones off. Let's see, mine's really off. Now's the time to do it. And let's see, I think we're gonna be ready. Are you guys ready to start your opening statements? Y'all set? Okay, we have our four candidates. To the left is Bruce Holloway. And the next person is Bill Smallman, then Bryan Largay, and then Alina Layng. So would you take it away for us, Bruce?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name's Bruce Holloway, and I've been a water district customer for 42 years. As both a tenant and a homeowner. And I got interested in the district about 2011, I guess, after my working career. And the district has gone through quite a bit of tumult this year. Board member resigned in May. Another board member resigned in June. And in July, the interim general manager self-destructed at a board meeting and began spewing vulgarities, which violated the respectful workplace policy. So he could not really continue. The district dodged a couple of bullets in August. The first one was that there was a long-term contract on the agenda to hire this interim general manager that had the problem in July. And it wasn't really clear to me whether they might actually give him a long-term contract. The second thing in August was he had a plan to take out a $19 million loan, which I thought was a very bad idea. And the main reason it's a bad idea is because the district has two loans that they already took out in 2019 and 2021 for about a total of about $30 million. And there is still money remaining from these loans. The one in 2019 has passed its 5-year anniversary. And so I don't think the district needs to borrow so much money until it spends the money that it already borrowed 5 years ago.
Hi, everybody. Bill Smallman here. Thanks for coming too. It's been a long time since I've been back here. One of Christopher Bradford's campaign slogan, one of Christopher Bradford's campaign slogan is the status quo must go. And I couldn't agree more. I ran for supervisor with some effective solutions to improve the building permit process, which is actually quite simple to do. But it's very sad to hear nothing has been done and stories about people not being able to rebuild their homes after the CZU fire. I'm probably one of the most self-critical person you'll ever meet. I'm always the first to admit when I make a mistake. I look back at every decision I took as a director and every single one of them was right. I do not make mistakes. This is all too easy for me. I've spent 35 years of my life building and designing water infrastructure. I know everything, every task involved with the business of water. I've probably built 5 San Lorenzo Valley water districts. The people that vote for me are the people that have common sense. Every 3 elections I ran, I came in first place. When I got elected in 2008, I was not quite aware of what was entailed with politics. It's like a whole other world to me. I felt like I was back in high school, sometimes in a mental hospital. My theory for this craziness is that most people who have common sense and talent have not been running. Today, however, common sense people have had it. Career politicians who pretend to be experts and form these elitist groups need to go. We are not taking this anymore. Bruce and myself and all the people who created Measure U are a grassroots spearhead movement which moved the direction of her water district to be fiscally responsible, be good stewards to the environment, be innovative on new and exciting water infrastructure improvements, and employ state-of-the-art asset management programs, which is the best way to maintain infrastructure and calculate fair and balanced rates. And I kind of don't know why I'm doing this anymore, because I took a lot of heat for all kinds of stuff. I have the people that just, all I've ever done for the 10 years that I served as a water district director is share my experience and help the district went better. So, and I know that when, there's gonna, okay, I'm all done. Thank you.
Applause for stopping when it said stop.
Hi, folks. I'm Bryan Largay, and I am so grateful to be here this evening. It said that democracies are run by the people who show up. Thank you for showing up. We're here to talk about water. Water sustains our families. It supports the forests and streams that make our communities so special. It can extinguish the fires that threaten our neighborhoods if it works. This is why I dedicated my career to water and watershed management. With a graduate degree in water resources, I've lived here in SLV for 25 years, working in the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Monterey Bay area to restore the watersheds we depend on. I've mostly worked for nonprofits since 2012 at the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, and before that at Elkhorn Slough. I've also run a small business focused on water. I've written and been the technical lead, winning $150 million in water and environmental grants directly benefiting our area. I've coordinated highly collaborative planning efforts and overseen tens of millions of dollars in public works projects. And it is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces. I'm deeply connected to the SLV community, with my kids graduating from the local high school and my wife teaching here. I helped secure $10 million for safe routes to schools along Highway 9. I coached SLV soccer and Little League. I volunteer on the board of the SLV Foundation for Education. And since June, I've served on the board of SLV Water. I look forward to our discussion this evening about the challenges we face together. I'll share my vision for safe, sustainable, and affordable water for all of us. Thank you.
On. All right. Hi, my name is Alina Layng, and I'm running firstly because when I was appointed to the Environmental and Engineering Committee, I realized that I could do this job. And secondly, because I got tired of wondering where young working families like ours were going to be represented on this board. Young parents rarely are represented in politics, because we're busy with sports practices, music lessons, scouts, play dates, building the life that our children deserve. How are we supposed to find time to run for office? But we also have the strongest reason, because the reasons to be concerned and work towards solving our world's problem because of our children. So I'm also running to make sure my son, who's here tonight, and my neighbor's children, and hopefully the children and generations after that, can inherit a healthy world and a healthy watershed. So I earned my bachelor's in science at Oregon State University with an emphasis in marine biology. And I studied at the renowned Hatfield Marine Science Center, and I gained a strong understanding for the needs of a healthy ecosystem through my education and working in watersheds at National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, and the Washington and Oregon Departments of Fish and Wildlife. So my experience working in watershed management is particularly relevant as we advance with the San Lorenzo River Watershed Conjunctive Use Agreement. And I'll work to optimize both surface and groundwater resources, which is critical for building a resilient water supply that can adapt to climate change. By managing these resources carefully, we can ensure that all residents have access to clean, reliable water, even as environmental conditions can change. Oh my goodness. There are 2 seats available on this board of elections, and I'm running alongside Bryan Largay, and he's a fellow scientist. And with our professional background as scientists and years of experience, we will both bring competence and good commitment to the board.
Okay, we start with our questions now. This first question goes to Bill Smallman. And the question asks, how can the water district adapt to shorter, heavier rainfall with longer periods of drought in between? And you have 90 seconds for your answer.
Yeah, I mean, we need to Can you ask that question?
No problem. I'm happy to do that. How can the water district adapt to shorter, heavier rainfall with longer periods of drought in between? And we'll start the 9 seconds now.
Yeah.
Turn on your mic.
Oh, sorry. Well, that is what actually, one of my plans was to put, basically groundwater recharge, basins in the sand quarry areas. And there's a lot of engineering involved with that, but what that does is millions and millions of gallons every year come down out of the San Lorenzo River. So if you believe in this idea that we're going to have these big rainstorms, shorter periods, and believe in that this climate change stuff is going to have that happen, we can store water, and it basically helps recharge the groundwater basin instead of flowing out in the ocean. And you can do that without hurting the fish habitat at all. And I think it's a really good idea, and it should be presented into the Santa Margarita groundwater basin. It's a very practical idea. It will work, and we can make parks, open space, protected open space in these areas, in these lands. There's two, when you drive over Mount Herman Road, there's Olympia and the Mount Hanson sand quarries. Well, right now they're fenced off. And this guy likes spraying glyphosate on. He supported spraying the Roundup. And when I was elected, I had glyphosate banned. Thank you.
Thank you. This question now goes to Bryan Largay. And Bryan, would you like the question to be read?
No, sure, actually, yes, that sounds great. Just remind me.
How can the water district adapt to shorter, heavier rainfall with longer periods of drought in between?
Great, thanks so much. So one of the amazing things that we have here at SLV Water is diverse water sources. And diversity brings with it stability. It brings adaptability. And by diversity, what I'm referring to is we have surface water sources, streams such as Fall Creek and springs. We also have groundwater wells. And during big winters, those streams flow with ample water. And we should and can take advantage of those systems if they're well maintained and well managed. They're very vulnerable, however, to being overwhelmed by large flows. And so ensuring that that infrastructure is robust is key to the good management of surface water during heavy water years. Using surface water at those times allows our groundwater wells to rest, allows the aquifer to recover, groundwater levels to replenish. Our groundwater basin is critically overdrafted. And so we need to allow our groundwater system to rest so that we can take advantage of it during dry years without exceeding certain tolerances. And so it's through best management of those two systems of our water called conjunctive use that we'll be able to navigate climate change in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. How can the water district adapt to shorter, heavier rainfall with longer periods of drought in between?
Okay. So we need to get creative on this, and building more reservoirs is not going to be the answer because the state of California is never going to allow that. So I think we need to be prioritizing more rainwater capture in our own backyard, so then we can still afford to garden. I think that Australia is doing a really amazing thing. Instead of having these big tanks like we see on a lot of properties that are above ground, they're actually burying longer, shallow ones. And so you're not taking up a lot of real estate on your property, and it creates a large network of not only water for your garden, but if we have, another fire, we have like emergency backup water possibly, and integrating that. And again, we also have to be managing our groundwater and surface water appropriately. Right now, we still don't have our intakes fully back online from the CZU fire, so that makes that extremely difficult. So we need to really be prioritizing rebuilding that infrastructure so we have that flexibility to be able to rest our wells during the wet season. 36. And so I think that's a big part that we need to go do there. And then we also need to keep moving forward on the San Lorenzo Valley Watershed Conjunctive Use Agreement and getting that finalized so we can better manage the water, not only for people, but for also our aquatic species and making sure that we're keeping enough water in the rivers for them. And you know, it is important that we have a good ecosystem, because you take one piece out of that, it all falls apart. Thank you.
Thank you, and again, we're asking all your thoughts just to get more questions in. So this first question goes to our last candidate, Bruce
I
Holloway.
think I got it.
Go ahead.
SLB Water District is a microcosm of the whole county. We have a full portfolio of water sources. One of the things I learned about the water district at some point is that we actually have a share. We have a water right in Loch Lomond. The district hasn't used its Loch Lomond water for 45 years. So we've allowed Santa Cruz to use it as if it's 100% their own. But actually 1/8 of the water in Loch Lomond is our right to use. And actually, I've been thinking lately, over in over in Scotts Valley, Santa Cruz owns a big piece of property called where the airport used to be. And I don't think that has been sold to Scotts Valley yet, but it's a similar situation where there's an asset that hasn't been used for decades by the owner. And so I wonder what we can do to get any use out of the Loch Lomond water. Maybe there's a three-way deal we can do with Scotts Valley Water District and the city of Santa Cruz, so that Santa Cruz can treat the water and provide it to Scotts Valley, and maybe we could get some money out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question I'm going to ask Bryan Largay first, and I'm actually going to merge two questions together, and we'll ask that you comment on taking over and coordinating with Big Basin and Scotts Valley Water District. Can you comment on your position on collaborating with or coordinating with Big Basin and Scotts Valley Water District?
What an interesting question. So Big Basin Water is a very sad story that I'm sure many of you are aware of. This is a small private water company that struggled with the burden of onerous regulation, old infrastructure, and had inadequate investment in that infrastructure. There was violations of various state regulations, and that contributed to additional pressure on the organization. Then the fire came, and one of the challenges residents faced is that there was not enough water to fight the fire, extinguish the flames, and save their homes. The water utility was burned, most of the houses were burned. And now those individuals want to join SLV Water so they have an adequate water supply and can rebuild. We need to work collaboratively to help them solve that problem, while ensuring that existing ratepayers aren't subsidizing their costs, because that just wouldn't be right to existing ratepayers. Scotts Valley Water District is a well-established utility serving 12,000 odd customers. The city of Scotts Valley, collaborating with them is important because we use the same aquifer, and hopefully we'll talk more about that later.
Alina, so can you comment on collaborating or taking over coordinating with Big Basin and/or with Scotts Valley Water District?
Okay, well, those are two very different topics there. But I do appreciate this question because my opponents have been misrepresenting my position on this issue. So I welcome the opportunity to clarify it. When this came up several years ago, I indicated that I supported the LAFCO evaluating the proposal, because ultimately what matters is not who is delivering the water, but that our community members receive affordable and sustainable service that it deserves. But at this time, there is no merger proposal on the table, and I see no evidence that SLV would be better served with that merger. So since this proposal is fictional, I think it's an unnecessary distraction from the real mergers that are happening right now with Brackenbury and Forest Spring. Our neighbors are literally running out of water. They are piecemealing back together their water system, and we need to help them. And we need to be a healthy water district to do that. And the same goes with Big Basin. You know, they're also a private water district that is failing, and it is very sad. And we need to be in a healthy position. So when the time comes that we can, you know, help them get their water systems back online too. But we need support from the county. We need some kind of monetary or grants to be able to do this, because we cannot put that financial burden back onto our current customers. So I hope that if any higher up legislators are listening tonight, like, please help our community recover from the CZU fire. It's been 4 years.
I remember going to a strategic planning meeting in 2011, the water district. It was on a Saturday morning. And Jim Mueller was the district manager at the time. He went up to a whiteboard, he drew a picture of the whole county, and he showed the different water agencies and the interconnections. At the time, in 2011, the interties hadn't been built yet. But it was very clear to me that Scotts Valley is 100% well water, and they need a partnership with someone in the long run. It's kind of looking today like that partner is going to be the city of Santa Cruz and not us, which is fine with me. The Big Basin Water is one of these three water associations that wants to join SLVWD, and I think in the long run, they will. Brackenbury, Forest Springs, and Big Basin Water. Brackenbury and Forest Springs are actually already in the district. The people that live there are registered voters in SLVWD. And I think we are just obligated to serve them. But all of us are suffering from the fire. The district is suffering still from those loss of those intakes on Ben Lomond Mountain. So we're all suffering from the fire. But the history of these annexations and consolidations is that there's a shared cost. The costs are not on one side.
Well, I was obviously, hello, obviously deeply involved with the Lompico merger. I know exactly what's involved. And basically the people that live in these, I'm all in favor for mergers. Lompico had to merge, and so I believe that I don't care what Big Basin, the people will end up having to pay for the majority of their repairs because they can't be a liability. The one thing when I got on the board, Bryan Lee's big mistake is he did not prioritize the repairs. So it was a liability. I know how to do that. I knew what the priorities were. So it would not be a liability. So I would be a very valuable director if we get all these mergers done. In regard to Scotts Valley is growing. It's becoming a city. So if they want to grow, they need to build infrastructure like these groundwater recharge water basins like I'm talking about. You're not going to get rainwater. All these people are new school environmentalists. So they think, oh, we cannot build reservoirs. I've built reservoirs. We can build reservoirs. It's very easy. And it wasn't too long ago when there was heavy earth moving equipment in those sand quarries. Now it's the Cyane sandhill things. And there's all these regulations that aren't really helping the environment at all. You need to wake up. We need to do something real. The conjunctive use plan is about the stupidest plan. And I'll talk more about that later and why it's so stupid. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question says with Alina. Alina, what can we do to make water more affordable?
Well, I think that our current rate structure, it really helps low income users because it's a tiered structure. And so the less water that you use, you actually pay less per unit. And as you move up through the tiered system and use more units of water and move into those next tiers, those unit costs actually increase. So our people that are single income houses right now are benefiting from our current system. I also advocated to increase our low income rate assistance program prior to this rate increase going in. And so if you qualify for the PG&E discount, you also qualify for the SLV rate assistant. And so you get $20 off your bill, which actually negates and then some of this last rate increase. So our lowest income people are not affected. I think we could do more and take more off of people's bills and be going, for grants and stuff to fund this pool. So we can, it's not a full program, but I think that the $20 sometimes think that that's not enough. So if we could raise that up and expand it to more people, I would be continuing to fight for that.
I completely disagree with Director Lang. The rate plan that we have now costs the low water users the most. The tiers are upside down. Anybody in tier 1 is paying at least 2/3 of their bill for just fixed charges. No matter how much water you use, you pay high fixed charges. Meanwhile, tier 3 is at $17 a unit. The last 2 years before the rate restructuring, the district took in $12 million of water revenue and sold 600,000 units. That means the average cost before the rate restructuring was $20 a unit. Any water that is sold below $20 is below cost and it's being subsidized by these high fixed charges that hit the lowest water users the most. So a tier 3 person can fill up a swimming pool at $17 a unit, and that is below cost. So that's why Measure U is to push down on the fixed charges. And the district actually lowered the price of water in the last restructuring. Most people are paying less for water, but they're paying a huge fixed charge. I don't think that's the way the rates should be structured. Thank you.
I'm going to answer this in a different angle. There's a really bad thing about the new school environmental this. And one of the reasons why you may not realize is the reason why water mains are placed above ground is because of environmental regulations. And I've installed some. I bid on one in a big basin that was right through a manzanita patch. I mean, it's a little bit less expensive, but they do not want to clear the land. Let me tell you something, if some of these lines were cleared and they had fire hose connections on them, it could have been priceless. But bottom line, they would have not gotten damage from the fire if they were underground. So, I mean, if I was director, I knew all this and they're exposed to vandalism and stuff. But bottom line, it's not just that decision. It's a lot of other decisions about their environmental decisions do not help protect the environment one bit. But they are very, very costly decisions. So we need to rethink. I'm an old school environmentalist and very practical. And I'm going to go later about so much money wasting that this district does not need that $2 million to take from the people. It needs to get more efficient, and we don't need it at this time. And there's other ways to figure out rate structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bryan, what can we do to make water more affordable?
Thank you. For our water system to be affordable, we need to invest in it. The most expensive thing in public works facilities management are emergencies. When things break, people have to work overtime. They have to work weekends. They get paid double time. People have to come in out of the area. They get no bid contracts because the water has to get back online. We need to invest in our water infrastructure so that we have stable, steady prices. Measure U, if that passes, will gut our infrastructure investments. It will cut our capital investment It'll cut our fire recovery investment. That will be a disaster that results in higher rates and more drama for our community in ways that are totally unnecessary. Further, we need to invest in our infrastructure for fire protection. The majority of our fire hydrants have inadequate flow to support firefighting. The majority of our fire hydrants are inadequate for firefighting. If we want to contain costs on fire insurance, we need to invest in our water infrastructure.
Thank you. This question now begins with Bruce Holloway. Bruce, what plans do you want to see for protecting water infrastructure before the next wildfire? And this person says above ground water lines, plastic storage tanks.
I guess I have to say, I agree with Rick Rogers about the two intake pipelines. Rick this was discussed at the board about a year ago. And I know a lot of people disagree, but Rick said that we can build those pipelines twice for what it would cost to bury them or to harden them in some other way. So to do it in a more to do a more costly pipeline is going to take more equipment, more heavy equipment on a very steep hillside, and it will require a wider bench for the pipeline and increase the costs by about double, as Rick said. So what I hope is that when we rebuild it, that we'll have a fire break there where the pipelines go. And if we can maintain the fire break, then maybe we can protect the pipelines better than we did this time. Thank you.
Rick doesn't know what he's talking about. You're looking at a 35-year veteran construction estimator, putting pipes all over. We put directional drilling, digging. It doesn't take too much to dig a ditch. They got to put these benches up to put the thing. They already have to do that earthwork. I do agree that it does cost more, but it's not. Rick's a operations guy. You know, he's a general manager. He doesn't know anything about construction. That's why he didn't start a construction crew. I wanted to start a design build construction crew, but he didn't do it. But he knows how to run the district very, very well, and he was a big loss. And so I can't understand why this district wasn't prepared for his retirement very well. That was a disaster. And then they hire this guy that, you know, he has this fluffy kind of qualifications like, geology or science or whatever. You need to have practical knowledge. And that's the practical knowledge, or you can pay more money. If you want to pay more money to have scientists and God knows what do these things, then you're gonna have to pay more money. Yeah, okay. If you want me to be practical, engineer, hands-on thing, then we can run the district efficiently and win well. Thank you.
So Bryan, what is your position for protecting water infrastructure before the next wildfire? And this person suggests about above ground water lines and plastic storage tanks.
Terrific. Our water infrastructure faces a number of vulnerabilities related to fire. In the last fire, for folks who don't recall, we lost a 6-mile long pipeline that went through district property above Boulder Creek. And as a result, we have a number of water sources offline. Currently, the terrain is very difficult to access. There's hazard trees everywhere. And the process of sorting out how to rebuild that pipeline is underway with a pioneering trail building crew trying to get in there to ascertain what does the ground look like, what can be done. I'm deferential to the experts who we're hiring to sort this out. They're the professionals on the ground. We're going to work with this assessment team. We're going to see what their engineers recommend. They'll crunch some numbers, look at some alternatives, and give us feedback on whether the most cost-effective long-term project is to bury the pipeline, or whether it's to have an above ground pipeline that is vulnerable and sacrificial in a sense. And as far as protecting it with shaded fuel breaks and veg clearing, that's a powerful idea. You know what measure is great for that is Measure Q. And I'll encourage you to vote for that, where the district can get grants to build just that kind of green infrastructure in our forests. Thank you.
Alina, what is your position on protecting water infrastructure before the next wildfire, such as above ground water lines and plastic storage tanks?
Okay, yeah. So when the fire came through, everyone thought, why did we put our water lines on the top, of this ground so they could be burned? And, that was a big question that I had too. And I sat on the E&E for 3 years, and then I figured out why. Because it's really not possible to bury these water lines. And in theory, it's a great and wonderful idea. But there's other things that, we can do to harden our infrastructure. I mean, we can do our tree and brush trimming. We can switch over to metal water tanks, which we are doing, and replacing also the redwoods tanks that we have as well. There is higher technology that we could look at. There's fire cameras and such like that. And one really easy one that has been on the books for a long time, and I advocated while on the Environmental and Engineering Committee, was our universal locks. Our fire department has asked us to put universal locks on our gates. So when there is an emergency, they can get up there and get there faster, and they don't have to waste time, cutting through locks. And I will just go back over again why we cannot bury the line, since it's such a big deal. It can cause landslides. We have a high sediment system. It can damage other people's property. It would put the water district in a liability if we did those landslides. As the landslides happen and that sediment goes into our systems, we choke out aquatic species like steelhead reds. And we can't do directional drilling because of the bedrock that's in the area. And again, yes on cue, because it would help this.
Thank you. This next question starts with Bill. Bill, would you comment on the concerns about the fire flow storage restrictions in many areas of SLB as laid out in the water master plan?
The fire.
The fire flow storage restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of violating restrictions. I mean, we need enough fire flow. You gotta get cut through the nonsense about, these lines we can bury, okay? It's not that hard, and we can also do erosion control measures to stop all these fears of not doing that. Those lines need to be buried, okay? They can get vandalized, and obviously they can get damaged by the rain. So, and we do need more fire protection. And the line was up there, this 5-mile line, if it was buried and if it had fire hydrant connections, it probably could have been priceless. So I don't buy this thing. You can't build this, you can't build reservoirs because of this, blah, blah, blah. I do construction, okay? I've done it for 35 years. And I'm telling you that it's positive. If you want to put handcuffs on and listen to these environmental things that don't help the environment at all, but they make it more expensive. If people want to pay more money, okay, don't vote for me. Don't vote for me. I'm trying to save the public money and spend the district money efficiently.
Thank you. Bryan, would you comment on the concerns regarding fire flow storage restrictions in many areas of SLB as laid out in the water master plan?
I'd be happy to. So a fire flow restriction is when a fire hydrant does not have adequate water. And the two types of restrictions that would limit the amount of water reaching a fire hydrant is a pipeline restriction where the pipe is too small, or a storage restriction where the tanks supporting flow to that fire hydrant may not have enough capacity to deliver the water required. And our fire standards call for large volumes of water in storage. For example, a commercial building should have 2,000 to 3,000 gallons of water per minute for 2 hours in order to contain what could be a life-threatening inferno. And, you know, back in the olden days, our mountain towns burned to the ground every once in a while. And the reason these standards are in place are to prevent that. And so earlier I mentioned this statistic that the majority, most of our fire hydrants have inadequate fire flows. Part of that is from inadequate pipe sizing, and part of that is from inadequate storage. Thus, we need to invest substantially in both of those aspects of fixed infrastructure. And that's why cutting the capital fixed charge and the CZU fire charge, if Measure U passes, would be a disaster.
Thank you. Alina, would you comment on the concerns of the fire flow storage restrictions in many areas of SLB as laid out in the water master plan?
Okay, yeah, so I want to make something very clear. The pipeline that burned was a raw water pipeline that was going to the treatment facility. It cannot be used to fight fires. So when we're talking about above ground and below ground burying this pipeline, it actually has nothing to do with fighting fires. So I think Largay talked on a lot of the points, but you know, most of our pipelines here cannot support the pressure required for firefighting. We have, you know, a lot of missing or inadequate fire hydrants in our system. And so part of the merger that we're doing with Brackenbray and Forest Springs addresses some of that, and they will be in the plan. They're going to be installing some new fire hydrants there. And we also need to continue improving storage. And we actually have some really great grant money that came forward to replace a bunch of aging tanks, and we can move those over to steel tanks. And we missed a lot of opportunities getting grants right after the CZU fire. So those like first 2 years, we went to the top of the list of all of those grants, but we had a director on the board that thought getting grants was a bad idea. And we had to fight them tooth and nail to get these grants. And we need to continue going for more, even though we're not in that 2-year period. We are still in a highly climate impacted area. And so that also pushes us to the top of the list. So we need to continue fighting for that. And again, vote for Measure Q to help fund some of these.
I think I'm one of the lucky ones that's in a neighborhood with a 6-inch water main in the street. And there's a tank at the top of the hill that's about 220,000 gallons. That's about enough to fight one house fire. And that's pretty much the standard that we would like to have throughout the district. There's many neighborhoods that only have 2-inch mains, and over time, those need to be replaced and upgraded. I used to live directly across the street here, and the house behind me burned, and I watched them run out of water. They ran out of water and couldn't finish fighting that fire. But that's a neighborhood where their tanks are being replaced now. This is like 30 years later. There were 2 tanks in that neighborhood that were small, and they're being replaced now. So there's a gradual program to replace, I mean, all the pipelines need to be replaced, but in particular, we have many neighborhoods that have small water mains, and over time, those will be replaced. It needs to happen continuously. Every year, we need to replace and upgrade parts of our system.
Thank you. This next question starts with Bryan. This person wonders, if elected, how will you keep costs down for repairs if Measure U passes?
Cost down for
Repairs, if Measure U passes.
If Measure U passes, how will we keep costs down for repairs? I think that if Measure U passes, we will I don't know that we'll have enough money for repairs. If Measure U passes, my understanding is that we would be looking at a $1.5 million shortfall in the first year, which would represent a 15-20% budget cut, which would likely result in freezing all projects, could result in laying off staff. And I would have a chilling effect on all of our projects. Probably the last people to be laid off would be the operations crew. They would be responsible for emergency repairs. If we had a situation where a lot of overtime was required, we'd have to be really careful about that sort of thing. Yeah, it's not a pretty picture, and I'm a little, I guess I need to prepare for that potential outcome.
Thank you. Alina, same question. The person's asking if elected, how would you keep costs down for repairs if Measure U passes?
I mean, we won't, if we have to repair something, we have to repair something, and, you know, we need the money to be able to do that in a critical infrastructure projects, such as addressing our aging pipes and improving the fire flow for our fire hydrants. It won't happen. That'll get put on the back burner. Like, you know, things that are, if other things are going to be put to the forefront of that, you know, and so our firefighters may face inadequate water supply from outdated or missing the hydrants, and the district's ability to respond to storm damage or, God forbid, another fire would be very hard. And also, you know, borrowing future money for projects can end up being difficult, because the district may no longer be able to support taking on that debt. And because when we do projects, we have to put the money out first, do the project, and then FEMA pays us back. So we have to carry that debt for a long time. So that's why it was really important to pass this last rate increase. So I'm really scared if Measure U passes, because of the well-being of our community and won't be able to afford things. You know, BCE was out of water for 3 days because we had a water main break. It was slated for repair. It didn't happen. And so my son actually had to miss school. They couldn't flush their toilets for 3 days. And that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think it is very worth funding our water district so our children can have water in their schools.
The district gave up $1.5 million a year of revenue when it lowered the price of water this year. The district gave up revenue first. Measure U is only intended to shift the balance so that there will be less fixed charges, less high fixed charges that don't depend on how much water you use. Doesn't matter how much your income is, doesn't matter how many people are living in your house or how much water you use. That's why high fixed charges are bad. They're regressive. They hurt the low water users and anybody with low income. Now, these appointed incumbents have only been in office for a few months, but already they gave away $100,000 to that outgoing district manager. They gave away $100,000 to him after his contract already expired. It's like a gift for bad behavior. And they also voted for an extra $220,000 on a contract. The way the discussion went, they said, let's share the wealth. Let's share the wealth. Let's give this contract to the high bidder, not the low bidder. And that was $220,000. They've only been in office for a few months, but they've already wasted more than $300,000. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things is, I proposed to build a design build department, and I worked about 8 years doing about $15 to $20 million worth of work for San Lorenzo Water for 8 years as the lead engineer. I don't even remind anybody, but when I first got on the board, we had a board member that violated the Brown Act. I guess he didn't read the Brown Act, and we were on the tune of spending $500,000 on lawyers. We sat in the, I guess I can speak about it now because they were going after me they thought I was leaking knowledge. And they didn't have a problem with it. Everybody that's on this against Measure U doesn't have a lick of experience with water, okay? They don't know how much stuff costs, they don't know how things run, they don't know things, I do. You know, I might get, if I get on the board, and if you hear from me, you need to, it's very difficult to determine if you need more money or not, and they don't have that skill. I can guarantee you that. It's very difficult. But I don't have the time to go through more money wasting things this thing, but I guarantee you, I can fill your ears with from some of the things that I've looked at of money being wasted. And we just don't need it right now. I don't believe that we need it. We can get by without it. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question starts with Brian. Brian, this is a long question, so I'm going to try to reformat it a bit here. What do you believe is the role of scientific research and analysis as if you were elected to stay on the water?
So the role of scientific research and analysis is relevant in a variety of ways for our work. There's the reality of climate science, and then there's the reality of environmental regulation. With regard to climate science, what we need to learn and pay attention to is the 5 major drivers of infrastructure damage that will become increasingly common in the years ahead. We have flood blowing out small creeks and destroying our intakes. We have landslide taking out our pipelines. We have windstorms. A lot of our costs right now are windstorm damaged facilities. We have drought and the urgent need to balance our water resources across groundwater and surface water. And we have fire. And what we know from the scientific literature is that all of this is coming with greater and greater urgency. Secondarily, or also, we live in a place with spectacular biodiversity and unique environmental resources. Applying best practices and our scientific understanding to steward those resources and ensure that we're not damaging them with our projects and we're taking care of them on our properties is of great value and importance to the community.
I apologize because you should have gone first on that question.
Oh.
I messed up, so.
Oh, that's fine.
So, what is your position of the role of scientific research and analysis for a water board district member?
So that's basically where my entire career has been, is doing research. But aside from that research, I ended up working for various state and federal agencies, which has made me well versed in the regulatory framework with the district operates within. So I really, as being a scientist, it helped me understand the complexities of that and how to secure funding with that. So that's why I am proud to say that I ended up securing a $1.1 million grant for the Fall Creek Fish Ladder Rehabilitation Project. And also, not only were we able to get the funds for that, we were actually able to implement design changes into the fish ladder, for which I had advocated for with my scientific background of understanding how lamprey navigate our waterways. And so with that money, we were not only able to install do the rehabilitation projects, but also make sure that lamprey can pass. And so it was an environmental and a financial victory. And just so everyone can understand this, lamprey can't do 90 degrees. They suck as they go up a fish ladder. And so they have to have rounded corners. And so a lot of times when we made fish ladders, we made them thinking about salmonid species and how they would navigate that. And so when you have a scientist on the board, they can really sit there and think through all the possibilities that are going to happen and how all the aquatic species are going to be using that.
Well, I was a computer engineer for 35 years. I certainly have a healthy respect for science and engineering. My main interest in the water district is more financial. And I guess I want to talk about the $19 million loan that the district has been talking about for over a year. When I first heard about the $19 million loan, the plan was to spend it over 5 years. It's not that the district needs $19 million this year. They had a chart that showed that it would be spent over 5 years. Then this summer, I heard the interim general manager say that the district would only be able to borrow 12 million instead of 19 million. And I thought, if Measure U did that, I'm proud of that, because the difference between 19 million and 12 million is a $19 million loan at greater than 4% would cost $800,000 a year. A $12 million loan would only cost $500,000 a year. That's $300,000 per year of savings. So I think we need to be responsible with how much money we borrow. And remember, we haven't even spent the money that we borrowed 5 years ago.
Since you didn't answer the question, can we have a rebuttal, please?
No.
I consider myself a self-educated scientist, actually, because I was gonna major in physics and this upper level physics at the University of California. If Bill Nye can call himself a scientist, I can. I'm a lot smarter than he is on science. And what I'm gonna inform you that he's wrong on so many things. The thing is may shock you, is we really don't, science is coming to an end of its usefulness, really. Common sense, it's common, what's going to save the environment is just simple common sense. This is our own slice of paradise. I know some people they truly worship science. It's a new religion called scientism, and they think science is going to solve everything. But in regards to saving the environment, it's just take simple. I'm all in favor of fish ladders and saving the lamprey and blah, blah, blah. I've always been in favor of all of that. But we need to have practical people, hands-on water, and we can do that to make sure that your rates, if you got your mind all clouded up with, oh, the science, rain, there's going to be drought. This water district's been here since 1941. Give me a break. There's not going to be all these things that we need Al Gore to warn us about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, if any of you candidates want to do rebuttals, that was what the closing statement would be, a good opportunity. Alina, now it's your turn to go first. I'm again going to combine two questions. It sounds like I didn't do a good job last time, so I'm hoping I do a better job on this one. So 2 people have asked that there be comments from the candidates about the vulnerability of underground infrastructure because of earthquake issues. Can you comment on the vulnerability of underground? In other words, if you were to make everything fire safe and put it underground, then you have the earthquake issues. Can you comment on those vulnerabilities?
Yeah, those are absolutely real concerns, especially in this area while we bury pipes. I was on the E&E committee and we were reviewing some stuff, and they actually were going through and they were looking at fault lines and where those pipe laid along those pipelines and how we could, improve the infrastructure on that. And it was a very detailed response. Like I asked Garrett about it, the engineer, and he explained it all. And there are things they can do at the joints and stuff, but they actually weren't going to be installing any of that. They were kind of hoping for the best. So that's really something that is unpredictable if we bury it, and a real risk of burying pipelines, because it's hard to detect leaks once they're buried as well. And so when we have that raw water pipeline that's above ground, you can find leaks easier. Otherwise, we have to do whole, ground kind of like penetrating equipment, and we have to hire a special consultant that comes out to find those leaks. And tracking them isn't always as easy as it can be. So when we have it above ground, it is definitely easier to deal when we have earthquakes and come in and be able to fix those repairs.
We've certainly, I can remember the earthquake in '89, and there were breaks all over the place. I guess I don't really see the connection between the intake pipelines and this question about burying things. I guess if Director Lang can take credit for the grant for the fish ladder, the fish ladder took 16 years to build. And I think at any time during those 16 years, there would have been grant money available from DWR. But it took so long to build it, the costs tripled in 16 years. But if she can take credit for that grant, which I really would give credit to staff for obtaining that, then I'm sorry, I guess I'm having a senior moment.
Let me take a moment to reframe the question because it's a complicated one.
Okay.
So the question, there are two questions, and to put them together, the people would like to know, what about the vulnerabilities of putting infrastructure underground? There are vulnerabilities in an earthquake, whereas there are vulnerabilities in.
I'm remembering what I wanted to talk about.
And you have 30 seconds.
There was a Chamber of Commerce event over at Scotts Valley Water District about 10 years ago that I went to, and I wound up talking to one of the employees over there, and he told me about their leak detection program. So I brought that over to this district, and this district began hiring this consultant about every 3 years to do leak detection throughout the system. They put microphones in pipes that are underground, and they were able to tell where the leak was by measurements, electronic measurements that they could do. So then they would know where to dig up the leak.
I almost can't take this nonsense. Finding leaks in an earthquake, you're gonna see it, you know, if a water main breaks and find it very quick. Earthquake, oftentimes we build metal tanks and there's flexible, they're called EVO couplings. A lot of times the water main that's connect to the water tank breaks, so they make it's called an EVA coupling in an earthquake. And yeah, I mean it just happens. Earthquakes are rare. I mean, I wasn't here in 1989, and I'm sure there was some water main breaks. They break, we fix them, and so it's not like, oh yeah, let's put all water mains above ground because of earthquakes. That is complete nonsense. Oh, because we can find the leaks quicker. Well, if you got a 24-inch water main, and then there's special earthquake pipe, I just installed a 18-inch one in San Francisco. It's from a company in Japan. If there's a serious area the geologists know is where the ground's moving, then you select this. It's a very specialized pipe it's allowed to move in the earthquake, and it won't break. It's very like it's a ERDIP, earthquake resistant ductile iron pipe. So anyway, there's a lot of options. It's not something that really should guide. Anyway, thank you.
So with regard to earthquakes built these mountains. These mountains are here because of eons old tectonic processes that lifted them up. Unfortunately, many of our mountains are also falling down. As you may have heard, Santa Cruz County has the highest density of landslides of any county in California, which is saying something because California has a lot of landslides. This creates enormous vulnerability to our homes and to our buried water infrastructure. This is one of the key reasons that our infrastructure is so expensive to maintain. Especially in the Measure U argument, you'll hear that our rates are higher than neighboring areas. Places like Santa Cruz are flat. Places like Scotts Valley are pretty flat. Almost all of the flat places up on the hills where there's a cluster of homes is actually the top of a landslide. And sooner or later that will shift again. And when it does, the water lines will break. And you know, we can get away with this for a while. Hopefully we'll be fortunate. The '89 earthquake was in dry weather. If it had been wet, things would have been worse. So these are just some of the reasons why our infrastructure, our water infrastructure is fragile, and continuing to reinvest in it with our fixed charges is very important. Thank you.
Maybe this next question starts with first. First, this person has concerns over the recent instability and turnover of managers and staff. And if elected to serve, what can you do to help ensure the employees feel supported and stay long-term?
There's two vacancies at the district that have been there for a year. One is the CEO and one is the CFO. And people have said, which I believe, that it's going to be difficult to hire a finance director until we have a general manager in place, because financial people tend to be kind of conservative and they're not necessarily going to want to go to a situation where they don't know who the boss will be. I think that we're probably going to have to pay a little more for a general manager than we were thinking a year ago. It's worth it. It's a very challenging job because there's three constituencies that have to be dealt with all the time: the public, the employees, and the board. And so it's a challenging job, and to find the right person who can do that is very difficult. And I think we may need, it's worth it to pay enough to get somebody that's good enough to do that job. And I think that not much is going to happen. The district isn't going to be able to make much progress until that position is filled, and the finance director. It's very difficult right now. We have a part-time contractor doing the finance director job, and she's only working 16 hours a week. It's barely enough to keep up, and to look toward the future, it's really not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of really astonished at why there was this thing with Rick Rogers, and I don't know, I guess he was getting micromanaged or something like that. But I mean, when I was on the board, he's going to retire in 2020, I think, and then you know, he's like a gold mine in information. I hope he stays around, because if I get on the board, I want to tap into that. But the general manager is the absolute. This water district could run with their quality general manager, and the board's like, you don't even need a board. Really, I'm serious. But the board makes important other decisions, but we need to have a quality. And quite frankly, I think I would be the best person to be on the interview board to select a general manager, because I've known 50 or 60 and I know what they do. I would never apply for that job. I know that I couldn't do it, because it take you, like what Bruce said, is you got to deal with the board, you got to deal with it. Bottom line, he has to have good chemistry with the guys that are running the district. And that didn't happen with this guy that it set down. So it's very important. And so he has to have a baseline of being operating in a treatment plant certification. Bottom line, the other stuff's a bonus. If he's a civil engineer, if he knows the other important stuff that he's got to deal with, the board, the legal issues, the regulations, all that stuff's very important. But bottom line, we need to find the quality guy.
Okay, Brian, the question is, there's a concern on recent instability and turnover of managers and staff. And if elected to serve, what can you do to help ensure the employees feel supported and stay long-term?
Thanks very much. I think that it is absolutely essential to support our staff, invest in our staff, and be grateful that the staff of the district are here and providing us with safe, affordable, reliable water. The things that we can do to ensure that: number one, we must not pass Measure U. If Measure U passes, no one in their right mind will want to come move into a house that's falling down. Number two, we need to support our general managers by giving them respect, not micromanaging them, showing them a collaborative mindset, problem solving together. The finance director and general manager who left cited poor treatment by a board member as the reason they resigned. And that's poor planning by the board. And then the third thing that we do need to do is have reasonable compensation to attract someone to come to a very expensive place, hopefully live in our community and share our water challenges with us if they're not already here. Many neighboring water districts are staffed at the senior level by people who live here but don't want to work here.
Thank you. Alina, would you like to question that?
Sure.
Okay. This person has a concern over the recent instability and turnover with managers and staff. And if elected to serve, what can you do to help ensure the employees feel supported and stay long-term?
Okay, yeah, so the tone of the board has been an ongoing issue. And yes, our finance director and our general manager left citing one board member. You can Google it. And so what we really need to be doing is supporting our staff and listening to them and respecting them when we're in meetings. I spent 3 years on the E&E committee with the director that was accused, and I've been yelled at a lot. It has gotten better since all these people are resigning, but as soon as that go into closed session, it comes right back out because cameras aren't on. So it is a really difficult situation to sit in as a board member and as a staff member. And so we also need to make sure that we're paying our staff a living wage. And so that means doing a salary study. And, currently our general manager is paid less than all the neighboring water districts. And they are, some people feel a more ideal place to live. I love Boulder Creek. I wouldn't live anywhere else. So, making sure we're paying them, also making sure that they're accommodated well with their office spaces and making sure that we keep our work in-house and not contracted out so they know that they're valuable. And I just want to rebuttal Wolfpack. If you don't believe that I didn't help with the grant, you can talk to Carly Blanchard. I attended a lot of workshops to make sure that we had qualified for Prop 1 funding. And I wrote a letter of recommendation, and I was told over and over and over again it was a mandated project and we would not qualify, and I got a grant.
Thank you. This next question starts with you, Bill. And the question is, if elected, what is your priority for this district?
Just basically to make it more efficient. I would like to the design build department and the internship program. And basically cut waste where I'm seeing a lot. I'm really seeing just one was the design for the these pipelines. When you hire an engineer, you have to have somebody that's on the board that can direct them to the quick design. Because some of these engineers aren't, well, quite frankly, they're not as good. If you have one of the big pipeline, I could probably turn around plans in about a month, but instead they did study. Over and over, you'll see a lot of the political things. They do studies, and these studies cost a lot of money, and they're a big waste of money. And again, if elected, I don't know why I'm doing this because it's hard because I see people's faces, and some of them are laughing at me, and some of them are agreeing with me, but I'm just here to help, and I do have a lot of experience, and I just want people to listen to me and share that experience. I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel that I could do this, and I can save the district $2 million, and we don't need the rate increase.
Thank you. So Brian, if elected, what is your priority for this district?
You might have gotten the sense, but just to make it really clear, our infrastructure is inadequate. Our fixed infrastructure requires capital investment to build resilience before the next disaster. And having reliable pipelines, water tanks, intakes, etc., is of great importance to everyone in the community. Investing now will save us money later. Investing now might save our homes. It'll save us anxiety. It'll allow our kids to go to school and flush the toilet. And there's no reason we should not be investing hard in our infrastructure. There's all sorts of other benefits too. Robust infrastructure within the core district area will make it that much easier to consolidate with our neighbors who lost their homes and lost their small water companies at Forest Springs, Brackenbray, and Big Basin. Robust infrastructure will make it that much easier to balance our water system and use conjunctive use to have groundwater during droughts and stream water when it is plentiful. So investing in infrastructure solves so many of our problems. And to do that, we need to spend money. We will spend down the loans previously mentioned in their entirety this year, this fiscal year, according to our finance director.
Thank you. Alina, what, if elected, what is your priority for this district?
Well, I agree that we need to continue to fund our infrastructure. So we are ready to fight this next fire. Most of our water pipes in the system cannot pressurize a fire hose. So we are not ready for the next fire yet. You know, we need to be investing in other things, like I said, about the universal locks on our gates. It's really not a high cost thing. So we need to be working on that. We really need to be, you know, really pushing forward faster on these consolidations. Brackenbray and Forest Springs are running out of water. They're continually on boil notices. I don't know if people see that on Nextdoor. They are spending more money trying to piece their systems together that could be going to actually rebuilding their infrastructure and connecting them permanently to SLB water. So the longer we delay that, the more we are actually spending. And again, we need to be really pushing forward on this conjunctive use. It's been delayed for quite some time. I am the alternate director on the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency. You know, they wanted to be able to push this forward more recently, but we don't have a general manager. So that needs to be one of our top priorities, because we really need to be balancing our surface and groundwater so we have a climate resilient water supply. And, you know, I don't know if I have enough time to talk about the loans borrowed, but just a quick little thing about that. When we borrow loans, they go to project specific. You can't reallocate those.
Thank you. Bruce, last on this question, if elected, what is your priority for this district?
We're in the 5th year after the fire, and those 2 pipelines on Ben Lomond Mountain, those 2 intake pipelines have yet to be built. I'm hoping that the Peavine pipeline can be built next year. It's not clear right now whether that's going to happen. And then there's a 5-mile pipeline beyond that. So currently we're down 60% from the capacity that we used to have to draw stream water from Ben Lomond Mountain. We're down 60% now. We can rebuild the first pipeline, then we'll only be down 40%. I've been asking for a cash flow projection. We are expecting $16 million from FEMA. These are projects that FEMA already agreed to. We already did the work, and we've submitted the paperwork, and we're just waiting for $16 million. So before we borrow $19 million, I think we should figure out how fast we're going to get the $16 million and plot that out in the future. Plot it out quarter by quarter, so we know what our cash flow is going to be. And I have a feeling that we can borrow much less and get only borrow what we can spend within 1 or 2 years, not repeat the mistakes that we made with these 2 other loans. And then the 3 systems on the west side of Boulder Creek, those need to be integrated. We need to get agreements with them.
Thank you. Alina, I'm going to let you go first on this one since I skipped you on your first one last time. And this will be the last question just for time, and after this we'll give the closing statements. Alina, what impact does climate change on the San Lorenzo Valley Water District have, and how should the district respond?
All right, well, climate change means that we have more intense periods of rainfall. So we're going to get more rainfall in shorter amount of time. And that was from Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency and their projections. And then we're also going to have longer, more severe droughts. So how does that affect our water? when we have these large droughts, we end up possibly relying more on our groundwater, and so we can actually overdraft that system. And when we do overdraft our groundwater, the capacity for it to hold water actually diminishes. So it kind of starts to collapse on itself. And not only that, as we pull more waters, we're at risk of pulling in more contaminants into the system. So that's something that we really need to work on. And then when our stream flows, you can't pull as much from those stream flows because there's, less rainfall in those droughts. And oh my goodness, I had another thought. Yes, and so we really need to be focusing on that. And so our base flows in the San Lorenzo River in the summertime, where do they come from? Because there's no rain. It comes from our groundwater. So again, if we're overdrafting that groundwater, we're going to have less water available in our streams, and that's less water available to aquatic species. Bean Creek is our Coho Creek, and it is highly affected by the wells that are there, and it can severely affect the flow.
Thank you. Bruce, would you like a question, Rebecca?
Yes, please.
Okay. What impact does climate change on the San Lorenzo Valley Water District have, and how should the district respond?
So I remember John Steinbeck wrote in East of Eden, when the dry, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said during the dry years, people forget about the wet years, and during the wet years, they forget about the dry years. So we had a drought in 2015, statewide drought. The governor told us was the new normal, but by 2017, we had tremendous storms and floods and things. So it changed very quickly. So I think conjunctive use is not a dirty word. We need to expand conjunctive use. It used to be that our district was 3 separate systems. In Scotts Valley was 100% groundwater, Felton was 100% stream water, and then Boulder Creek, Ben Lomond, Brookdale was pretty much conjunctive use, where we had stream water off of Ben Lomond Mountain in the winter, and then when the streams dried up, we would have well water from Ben Lomond. But we need to expand the conjunctive use so that we can use the Felton water over in Scotts Valley so that they don't need to be 100% groundwater anymore. And there's 2 water rights in Felton that are being negotiated right now. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to use water outside Felton. Thank you.
What impact does climate change on the San Lorenzo Valley Water District have, and how should the district respond?
The answer is no and nothing. I think I know everybody probably believes in climate change. I don't use the word believe in my vocabulary because I am a self-educated scientist. There is no published theory of climate change. And I believe Dr. James Hansen that worked for NASA, he's pretty much a quack in my opinion, because all he did was he used data that showed that both CO2 and the climate is increasing, and that's it. He didn't do any research, but the fact is the CO2 is only gone 0.01%, and so bottom line, and the conjunctive use plan, I should talk about that. It's a really dumb idea because basically it's taking clear water and then pumping it back into the ground. Well, that's where we get most of our water. So the bottom line is we need more water storage. So the idea of building reservoirs is cheap. We could do it on this sand quarry line. I'm probably not going to be able to ever do this. I agree, but it's a good idea. And then fire protection. Hello, 2 big reservoirs right there for the helicopters to pick up things and go if there was another, God forbid, a fire. There's so many benefits that, hey, I'm going to stick with it. I think it's a great idea. But anyway, climate change is definitely a hoax.
Thank you. And let's see, Brian, last question. What impact does climate change on San Lorenzo Valley Water District have, and how should the district respond?
So I think I've spoken a bit about the impacts of extreme weather events on our infrastructure and the importance for investment there. So I'll just take this moment to talk about how climate change is affecting our district in the sense of the geography that makes up the water district, this landscape, and all of us who are residents of the district. And one of the big ways it's affecting us is it's making things more expensive and less predictable. Fire insurance, oh my God, right? And the road closures and landslides and slip outs, there's a lot of burden being placed on our community right now by a variety of natural disasters, small and large. We need to stick together. We need to invest in our resources, invest in our infrastructure, invest in our water district. We also need to help low-income people. There's a rate assistance program on the Water District website that has 4 different ways low-income families can receive rate assistance. They are undersubscribed. We need to help our low-income neighbors access those and see support. Measure U will not help low-income people. Measure U principally helps the lowest water users who are second homeowners. They do not need our help. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've come to the time where the candidates give their closing statements, and we're going to go in the same order that we started. So Bruce, will you take us out with your 2-minute closing statement?
I guess I want to start by saying, conjunctive use to me does not mean active recharge. I think we should only do passive recharge, which means if Scotts Valley could get stream water from Felton for some months of the year, then they wouldn't be 100% on well water. I'm not in favor of any kind of injection wells or active recharge. Every time I think about that, I think about the fountain in front of Santa Cruz City Hall. It's bone dry, but if anybody invests in active recharge, I think what they're building is a giant recirculating fountain, and it's very costly in terms of energy. So my main interests are financial. I want the district to do cash flow planning and not borrow huge amounts of money that are unnecessary. What we need is sustained effort over a long period of time. When I look at the map in the conference room where the board meets, there used to be 160 miles of pipeline. Now the map shows 190 miles. If you consider that a pipeline might have a useful life of 95 years, that means we need to be replacing 2 miles per year. That's about at least $2 million for that. Then we have 45 tanks. They need to be recoded every 15 years. That means 3 tanks every year need to be recoded. That's another $1 million. And that's not counting all the vehicles, all the computers, and other electronic equipment that the district always needs to buy. So I think even $4 million a year would be a bare bones capital investment program. If we did that for 5 years, that would be $20 million. So I want to see us be able to do sustained capital investment in an amount that we can afford over the long run.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those questions were awesome. I mean, I didn't quite know what they were going to be, but I think I felt like I could express what my position on everything. With answering those questions, they were great. I've been an environmentalist my whole life. At 10, I put a depth and a microscope in my closet and made my own laboratory. I never miss an episode of the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. I'm an old school environmentalist. You have to get a higher level understanding of environmental regulations and science to understand that it's really not, it's coming to a point where it's really not helping on certain issues. Regulations without common sense do nothing to help the environment, and they're detrimental to the economy. And many of the latest scientific endeavors today are both useless and harmful. The reality is going to sweep across the world. These are some of the issues that are applicable here. Glyphosate, I couldn't figure out why they wanted to spray this crap in the watershed, but it's not only harmful, but it's useless. The sand cores need to be opened up for public access with the groundwater recharge reservoirs. Putting water mains on top of the ground that have melted from the fire is really a stupid idea. The district can went okay with an experienced board as long as they have a good general manager. The board works for the general manager, not the other way around. Current board is dysfunctional and will remain. They failed the smooth transition of Rick's retirement. Directors have been bothered staff with stupid questions. With me on the board, all they have to do is ask me rather than bother the staff. They hired someone with select qualifications, sort of like what Bryan and Alina have, which is a big waste of time and money. The $2 million per year is not going to save this district. Me and Bruce will. This money will not be spent effectively, and then they'll request another rate increase. This has to stop. I will immediately have an impact by providing valuable guidance, input, engineering consultants and engineering staff. I will be a key member on the interview board, get a new GM. I will design the design build department and internship program. I believe this will take with a good.
Thank you. That microphone's not working.
The microphone's not working. Something off with it.
Testing. Thank you so much for the opportunity to connect with you this evening. SLV Water faces big challenges. Our tanks and water lines are old and failing. Most of the roads winding through our district have a water line under them. Landslides and slip outs are constant threats. Most of our fire hydrants do not meet current standards. We need to invest now to prevent the next disaster. A broken pipe last spring, as you've heard, meant Boulder Creek Elementary didn't have reliable water for 3 days. That's not okay. We need to invest now to avoid that kind of drama. Emergency repairs are obscenely expensive. The high cost of living is a threat to the fabric of our community. We need to invest now to save a whole lot more in the future. And please vote no on Measure U. It would slash our investment in fixed infrastructure, fire recovery, and fire preparedness would grind to a halt, not to mention consolidation with our neighbors. Our system is far more complicated and vulnerable than what you would find in a city with small lots and a simple grid. 90% of our costs have nothing to do with how much water we use. That is why we cannot pay by the gallon. We cannot cut fixed rates for the next 25 years, which is what Measure U would do. SLB Water is a system. We're all on this bus together. Measure U means driving with bald tires and shoddy brakes. We need to fix this rig and make sure everyone has a seatbelt. For safe, sustainable, and affordable water without the drama, I ask for your vote. And please vote no on Measure U. And please tell your friends. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of mudslinging and misrepresentation on the other side. That type of negativity is a distraction from the difficult reality that our water district faces and from the chaos that the opponents themselves have brought to the water district over the years in the form of lawsuits, HR complaints, censured hearings, and now an initiative that would gut our ability to rebuild our infrastructure and work towards a sustainable, affordable watershed. We don't need to resort to negativity ourselves, but it would be dishonest not to acknowledge the trauma that has been caused by past and current leadership at the San Lorenzo Valley Water District. Trauma that many staff members have endured at the hands of a dysfunctional board. We've seen the effects. More than 10 district employees have left because of the hostile environment created by these chaotic boards. Each resignation sets the district's project back by hundreds of work hours and costs tens of thousands of dollars in lost productivity. It's unacceptable that the central focus of our water district has ceased to be the straightforward task of managing water and is instead managing the HR crisis inflicted by members of the board. Our staff's well-being matters. It's not just about politics or policy. It's about the human toll that this dysfunctional leadership has taken. When leaders foster a toxic environment, it destroys the trust and initiative of those who keep our district running. Before you cast your ballots, I encourage you to research my opponents' names and see what the staff and public have courageously spoken up about. We need calm, steady, data-informed leadership. We need to focus on making good policy and rebuilding our staff, not getting drawn into unnecessarily costly drama of people who thrive on chaos. If you vote for me, I promise to refocus our efforts on what truly matters, building a stronger, healthier water district that retains the skilled workforce necessary to deliver water effectively, affordably, sustainably to our community now and into the future. Have the education, experience, and proven results gets the dog job. Thank you for your vote.
For the four candidates, we have Bruce Holloway and Bill Smallman, and Bryan Largay and Alina Layng. Thank you again. And we're going to do the fastest ever turnaround. These guys are going to go on and get comfortable. And we've got two people coming in who are going to give us a presentation on pro and cons on Measure U. So let's get the U people up and the candidates. Thank you again.
Low water users are the ones that are stuck with the greatest percentage of increase over the 5-year proposed by the current rate increase. All you got to do is the numbers. I know numbers aren't necessarily what everybody wants to do, but they are what drives the district. In fact, as a director, your number one job is the numbers. The rates in the idea behind Measure U is to restore the balance between fixed rates and variable rates that we've had from 2017 on to this last rate increase, where the district was operating just fine, was raising money just fine. That restoration can be done within 90 to 120 days after Measure U passes. This isn't an 18-month process. The models are already in place. And in fact, I started over the last few days using the model that the consultant had provided to come up with some alternatives on how rates might actually work that would be much fairer to the community. Please note that by restructuring the water rates in this fashion, we also encourage conservation. And that is one of the goals that the board had when it entered into the rate restructuring process. And then finally, we are going to be able to vote on this in a yes or no fashion, unlike Prop 218, the last part, where you just had to vote no. This is much better for our democracy. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get fairer rates, equitable rates, and that is in fact in the district's mission statement, equitable rates. What I've been seeing out in the community with regards to Measure U is a lot of fear. The district's going to go to the dogs if we pass Measure U. The district won't be able to do this. We won't be able to raise money. We won't be able to borrow money. These are all things that are the oldest political trick in the book, which is to distract you from the facts and the truth and to use fear to overcome your reason. And what we're going to talk about here in this presentation is about reason. The fact is the fear mongering isn't helpful to discussing policies. It's very interesting to note that the opponents of Measure U do not talk about how great the current water rates are. Instead, they're proposing fear. Let's keep in mind a few facts before we go into the numbers. Our current water usage has been very stable, with the exception of the drought years over the last 10 years. You just have to go to the annual report and take a look at that. That would be on page 59. With a couple of exceptions, we do not have any projects ready to go into construction yet. They're all in the design phase. And if you go to the July 18th engineering report on on the board packet, July 18th, page 332, you'll see the layout that the district engineer puts in place. So we have time here before construction season next spring in order to bring the rates back to where they were. The quantitative approach to numbers and making policy decisions is very important. Let's first understand the invoice distribution. The district sends out about 8,000 times 12 invoices every year. 60% of those are for people using 4 units of water or less, very skewed to the low end. Unlike the district mailer, which said that the average use is 6 units. That's just not true. Only 7% of the invoices are at 6 units. That's the opposite of average. Once you understand that, you can then understand that the current rates, which unfortunately, I don't have a bigger chart, but these will be on slvh2o.org here in a few days. You'll see that there's a U in the rates. They go like this. The low water users pay the most. The water users in the 5 to 8 range, 5 to 8 unit range, pay the least in terms of percentage increase, and then it goes back up. But it goes back up to where some of those people using 20 units of water still pay on a percentage basis less than somebody using 2 units of water. 62% for 2 units, 58% for 20. This is not equitable. This is not fair. This is burdening the people that use the least, that responded to our efforts to conserve. Let's go back and review where we were, which is looking at the U graph, which shows who is actually bearing the burden. Well, I appreciate your interest, ma'am. Thank you very much. So it's the U chart showing who is actually bearing the burden on a percentage basis of the increases. In addition, it's very interesting to note that of the incremental revenue over 23 to 24 with the different rates, 57% of that incremental revenue is borne by the people in tier 1, the 0 to 4 units. So not only are they bearing the largest percentage increase, they're also bearing the brunt of, in fact, the incremental revenue. Again, this is just not fair. So there's no question that the district needs to borrow money and raise money to fix infrastructure. Infrastructure has been one of my top priorities for the entire time I've been on the board, and is one of the reasons why I was a proponent of taking out the loans that we did, though we had hoped that we would do construction faster. It is to fix infrastructure that had been neglected for decades and get on to a slow, steady process of where we're spending anywhere from $3 to $5 million a year fixing the infrastructure. So I understand the need for rates. As a CFO, numbers are what I do during the day. However, let's make sure we put to rest misinformation. The finance director has said that we have sufficient funds to do operations. That means if there's a leak, it will get fixed. We also have sufficient funds to do the design work necessary for the construction projects that will start next year. What Measure U will allow us to do is to create a rate increase program through the volumetric rates that will show something more like this, the top chart, where everybody has pretty much the same percentage increase. The people using the least amount of water have the lowest, and those using the most amount of water have the highest. That is, in fact, the fair process. And the percentage difference between the two is about 10%. I put these numbers together over the last few days, and this number here also delivers a little bit more in incremental revenue, not a lot, but a little bit more in incremental revenue than the current rate program. And it also shifts the burden of who is hit by the rate increase to make it so that the people that are using the mid-tier, the 5 to 8, are assuming a little bit more of the incremental revenue. Fairness. It's very important in the community, particularly a public agency, that things are seen as fair, because that's how you sustain trust. If there is a group of people, and 60% of the invoices means it's a large group of our 8,000 subscribers, believe that they're the ones being hit with the bulk of the rate increase, that doesn't inspire trust. And that's what we need to get to. That's why one of the reasons why Measure U is so important. So again, fairness. Fulfill the district mission for equitable rates. Not used where some people are much better off and some people are much worse off. We can, should the board choose to, set new rates within 90 to 120 days. This is not an 18-month process. The models are in place, all the cost information has already been put in place, and the board can move pretty quickly, as we saw with the CZU surcharge, to put in place new rates through a new Prop 218 process. It's about 1 or 2 meetings, board meetings, which is a month to a month and a half, 30 to 45 days. And then it's a 45-day protest period for the Prop 218 process. At the end of that, the new rates go into effect. So if we were to start that in December, by February or March, we'll have new rates in place. Construction projects won't start until that time anyway. And the last time we looked at taking out a loan, we could have taken that out in about a 60 to 80-day process. So all of these things will come together next spring if we need additional money. That is, if the FEMA money doesn't come in. And I do support what Bruce was saying about cash flow. I've been asking for cash flow projections for months. I asked for it during the last rate increase process so that we could see exactly what money we needed at what time. The good news is we did hire somebody. Unfortunately, you have to do this nowadays with FEMA. They're not necessarily zippy. We did hire somebody to help us collect that information, that money, because we do need that. I think it's really important here for all of us to dial down the fear, to talk about policies, to talk about where the money gets raised and from who, to talk about equity and fairness in a way that allows us to have a reasonable conversation. And put into the public information that backs that up. And that's what this presentation was designed to do. And what hopefully your questions, as they come to us, will help elaborate on some of the information you've heard just now. As it turns out, I don't need all 15 minutes. We'll actually be able to move forward a little bit faster and maybe have more questions as part of this. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Thank you. And thank you to the audience for listening to that last bit of that. So Jim Mosher, you're up, and you have 15 minutes for presentation against Measure U.
Thank you all for hanging in here with us. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this Measure U and why you should be voting no against it. What do we want as our legacy for our children and grandchildren when it comes to safe, affordable, and reliable water and a healthy watershed in the San Lorenzo Valley? I truly believe that this is what is at stake in this election. Building a positive legacy and a community spirit in SLV has motivated me to engage over the last 20+ years as a volunteer to support sound water policy and to support our water district. Locally owned water and treating water as a fundamental human right are fundamental principles that drive mine and most of you here for our commitment to SLVWD. But why are the stakes so high? Our district is in a crisis. We have $50 million or more of damages from the CZU fire and the recent winter storms. We have aging infrastructure that cannot support firefighting and is vulnerable to climate change. We have 25 miles or more of aging pipes that cannot support fire hoses. We have fire hydrants unable to meet the pressure requirements for fighting fires. We have, most of our senior staff has left. We've had tremendous staff turnover, and as you've heard, some positions that can't be filled, including a district manager and our finance director, two of the most important positions. Our neighbors in Brackenbury, Forest Springs, and Big Basin Water Company need our help, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort and money to help them. Operations and capital costs are exploding, and climate change, damage from catastrophic fires, storms, and droughts are increasing, and we have to plan for them. That's expensive, and it's going to be challenging to protect our watershed and aquifers. Measure U is a monkey wrench thrown into the works of the water district that threatens the district's ability to respond to these challenges and to survive for our children and grandchildren. Short term, it eliminates the CZU fire surcharge and the capital charge, enacted specifically to address the problems I listed above. It's about $170,000 a month and at least $1.5 million before we could do another rate study. The finances will be put into chaos. There will be staff layoffs, major shifts in priorities. There'll be slowdown or just ceasing infrastructure repairs and upgrades, and it will contribute to the staff instability, and they are our most important resource. The idea that this could be accomplished in 3 to 4 months is just a fantasy. There is no guarantee to begin with that Raftellus, the firm that did the rate study, would even be interested. We'll have to do an RFP in order to get another firm to help us. Things have changed in the last year and a half since Raftellus did their analysis. This will have to be looked into. It is unlikely we'll have a permanent district director or a finance director during this process, the two most important positions in order to get this accomplished. There will also be some very thorny decisions regarding how to set per gallon rates, whether there should be tiers, and if so, what they should be, whether to increase them enough to capture the lost revenue from its passage. And that's just to name a few. Once proposed, who knows if it'll actually be implemented? Will it be challenged again? Will it be challenged if some people don't get their way, or we have to go through this process again? Measure U has already cost the district at least $100,000 to put the measure on the ballot and to pay legal costs and staff time, and has increased the cost of loan. A new rate study will cost another $100,000 and be more and divert staff time from critical issues and district facing yet another lengthy bureaucratic process. But these cuts and redirection of priorities are likely to have a snowball effect, compounding over time. And then there's the 2% cap. Measure U says that fixed rates cannot be raised more than 2% for the next 25 years. So our children and grandchildren are going to have to be dealing with the consequences if this passes. That's far below the anticipated rate of inflation. Our per gallon rates would have to go up substantially over time, and this creates substantial instability in the finances and knowing what the revenue is going to be over time. To give you an example of one of the unintended consequences, San Lorenzo Valley School District, 6.5 million gallons a year is one of our largest, if not the largest, water users in the district. If we go to primarily per gallon rates, their share is going to go way, way up. Just a 5-cent increase per gallon is of $330,000 for the water district. Now, Barb argues that creating this chaos and putting our district's future in jeopardy is justified using several arguments that are misleading, misinformed, or outright false. And the first one, of course, is that the idea that what has been placed is not equitable. The fact is that 90% of the costs of the district are fixed. It's fixing the bus that Bryan talked about. What you're paying for really is the privilege to, when you turn on your tap, you get safe, reliable water coming out of it consistently. That's what you're paying for. From the district's perspective, the water doesn't really cost anything. It's the infrastructure and getting the water from the source to your tap and to the fire hydrants. That is what the district is paying for. It's a fundamentally different than other commodities in this fashion. The fire surcharge and capital charge, the two charges that are going to be eliminated if Measure U passes, benefit everyone, regardless of their water usage. This issue did not come up when the fire surcharge was first implemented. It was just agreed. In order to deal with the fire damage of the district, everybody needs to pay because everybody benefits. But perhaps most importantly, the new rates were structured to shift the primary financial burden on heavy water users, not low volume users. Tiered rates were put in place in this rate study. This was something that was very, very important, and it's really a significant change. The first 4 units are intentionally lowered to benefit low volume users. The shift toward heavy users increases steadily over the 5-year period. Just for an example, a low volume user, that's 2 units a month for all 12 months, because you have to do this on an annual basis, not on a monthly basis. Their rates will go up $28, on average, $28 a month over the 5 years. By contrast, those who have moderate gardens, who use 2 units a month for maybe 6 months of the year, but then the parts of the year where you have using the water for your garden or your swimming pool, that's when the rates really go up. Those folks will have their rates double. So Bob's numbers have 2 major fallacies. The first is he's talking about invoices. That's monthly. That includes folks who have gardens but use low amounts of water for half or 2/3 of the year. Their rates go way up in the months in the summer when the higher per gallon rates go in the tiered rates. The second fallacy is that he's talking about percentages and not dollars. Yes, if you're not using let's say you're in a taxi cab and you pay $2 for a ride, and then the rates go up, and so you have to pay $3, then you've had a 50% increase. But if you take a 6-mile ride, it's a much smaller increase, a much smaller percentage increase, but it's a big dollar increase. So you have to look at who's paying the dollars. The percentage rates undermine the understanding of how tiered rates work. The burden of these new rates fall on the heavy users if you look at the dollar. And those are the 2 fallacies that you need to understand how this works. Furthermore, the new rates, tiered rates, are the research shows is the way to promote conservation. And it's very simple. The way you get conservation is to get the heavy users to use less, because they're the ones that have the most discretion to cut back on their rates. Low volume users don't have a lot of ability to cut their water use. So you want to have tiered rates so that the heavy users will cut back on their rates. And that's why the tiered rates are so important for conservation. Then there's the claim that this new Measure U is going to help low-income users. I don't really want to go back into this. 5 minutes? Okay, great. We don't have any data on how much low-income users use. It could be that many of them are in families and they use 4 or 5 units. Households that use 4 or 5 or 6 units a month all year long are the ones who most benefit from the new rate structure. The way we can help low-income families is to promote and increase the low-income rate assistance program. This has been talked about before, and it's the top priority of the Friends of San Lorenzo Valley Water, the group that I am part of, which had worked tirelessly to get this program in place. And ironically, it's now in place, but Director Fultz, I don't know how many times, Bob voted against implementing this program because he said the district could not afford it. I want to conclude by comparing the processes used to develop the rate study that's now in place and Measure U, which we're now going to have to vote on. The rate study took 13 months. The district hired a leading firm that has experience throughout California in helping water districts set rates. There were multiple opportunities for community input and engagement, and it was approved by our elected officials on the board in a 4-to-1 vote. Now let's compare that to Measure U. Bob and Bruce, apparently at their kitchen table, came up with this, a 1-page document, 2-page document. There was no opportunity for any community input or review before it was starting to circulate to get on the ballot. There was no advice, review, or assistance from any experts actually knowledgeable about water district rate increases. Bob claims that this is an exercise in democracy. A brainchild of 2 or 3 people. We're supposed to trust them on such a complex issue with no review or input, and is putting this poorly drafted, ill-informed, and ill-advised initiative before voters in a combative, slogan-filled, divisive campaign, the best way to determine the future of our water district. I maintain it is not. The new road sign promoting Measure U if you drive on Mount Herman Road coming toward Felton provides the message that I think captures what is really going on here. This is not really about equity or conservation or helping poor people. What the sign says simply is, save your money. Vote for Measure U. Unfortunately, providing safe, reliable water and protecting our watershed costs money. Underinvestment is simply not an option. We cannot remove $1.5 million from a small water district such as ours and not have serious consequences. No U-turns. Vote no on U. Thank you.
Okay, this first question will go to the motion. And this question asks, if Measure U repeals funding for the CCU rebuilding, how are those projects going to be funded?
You have 90 seconds. After 1 minute, I'll hold up a 1 minute, then I will hold up a 30 second, and then you'll be done.
Well,
Turn it on.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I don't know the answer to that question. If Measure U passes, we are going to be in a real crisis in terms of actually addressing these infrastructure crises. Contrary to what Bob has to say, it's going to create a crisis in funding and a crisis in our staff. It's going to be more difficult to recruit people to the district with this passes. It is completely beyond what the people who know know water districts and rate studies say is appropriate. The firm that we work with, Rafellis, actually said we need to raise the fixed rates higher in order to create the stability that you need to deal with all of these infrastructure projects.
The question is, if Measure U repeals funding for CCU rebuilding, how do we fund those projects? And there's a 90-second opportunity
90 seconds.
for you to answer.
Yeah, so let's make sure again, we understand the numbers here. There's not going to be a permanent $1.5 million worth of revenue pulled out of this. It'll be restored back through volumetric rates. And that can be done very, very quickly. The way we're going to pay for the CZU restoration, as well as all other infrastructure, is through borrowing money, or assuming that we get FEMA money back, the money that comes from that we've already spent, so that we don't have to borrow money and incur the interest costs. This is no different than anything else that we do with all the construction that went on over the course of the last year that we've been working on the design proposals for the last 3 years. So again, we need to dial down the fear and really look at this from the point of view of who is being charged the most. And by the way, I don't know about you, but percentage is sort of the way I deal with a lot of things: interest rates, how much your home insurance is going up, and et cetera. So looking at it on a percentage basis actually allows you to see how much of your disposable income, assuming you have any, you're not on a fixed income, you're going to have to spend, because everybody is coming at you with additional money. This in fact helps those people that need the help the most.
Thank you, Bob. You can remain standing because you've answered this next question first.
Okay.
So how would Measure U, if passed, affect the SLV Water District's ability to implement improvements that were suggested by ACL Engineering to address concerns about flow levels for firefighting? And this person parenthetically adds, the proposed implements were related to pipe diameter and storage requirements.
Yeah, so again, this all goes back to infrastructure. And unfortunately, prior to 2018, when a group of us joined the board, very little infrastructure had been implemented for like 30 years before that. The board at that time embarked upon an aggressive program of infrastructure improvements, which is the reason we borrowed $30 million. We need to be investing a minimum of $3 million a year. It'd be better to be doing $5 million a year. This is going to be paid in the same fashion as every other infrastructure that we do, guys. There's no magic here. You can't go 30 years not doing any infrastructure and then turn the switch and have it all fixed in 1 year. It just doesn't work that way. It's going to take, and in fact, ACL in their report said that over the next 10 to 15 years, we would have to be investing $3 million a year in order to be able to address the infrastructure requirements that we have, possibly as much as $5 million a year. So all of that's going to be done through a combination of revenue and borrowing. There's no reason here to think that there's a fear factor that you have to be afraid of with respect to Measure U once the volumetric rates get restored back to where they were prior to the rate increase going into effect this year. As Bruce said earlier, the district voluntarily gave up 1.5 million in revenue in volumetric rates.
Thank you. Shall I repeat the question for you?
Please.
Okay, and there's been a request that you hold the microphone a bit closer.
Okay.
So the question is, how would Measure U, if passed, affect SLV Water District's ability to implement improvements that were suggested by ACL Engineering to address concerns about flow levels for firefighting? And parenthetically, it mentions that the proposed improvements were related to pipe diameter and storage requirements.
Well, as I said before, I just don't know because the instability that's going to be created by Measure U and the loss of revenue. I want to go back and actually correct my taxi cab analogy around percentages versus dollars, because it's important. Suppose you have a 1 mile ride and it costs $5 to get in the cab and $1 to get that ride. And then the rates go up $1. So now you're paying $2. So you're paying an extra 100%. Now suppose you go 10 miles. So that's $10. So your rates, oh God, I still have it wrong. Sorry about that. But the point is that it's important to look at who's paying, because if you're paying a small amount, and then you have a 10% increase, that's a fair amount of money. But if you're already paying a lot and you have the same dollar amount increase, it's a very small amount. So you have to look at the dollars in order to understand who's paying. And in fact, it's going to be the heavy users who take the primary burden on this. And I simply disagree with Bob. We've talked about it all evening. Measure U is going to create instability. It's going to cut an enormous amount of money out of the budget. There's no guarantee there'll be a new successful rate study. It's going to take much longer than he's claiming. And so we're putting ourselves in great danger and putting our staff at risk.
Thank you. Until we remain standing, you go first on this question. So it's kind of a broad question. It asks, how do you determine the most likely effects of Measure U compared to the current rate structure?
How do you measure?
How do you determine the most likely effects of Measure U compared to the current rate structure?
Okay, well, first of all, there's the loss of revenue. I just want to point out that even if it takes 3 or 4 months, as Bob claims, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost revenue, first of all. So we're going to lose a lot of revenue. Perhaps when we do the rate study, if we do the successful rate study, we recapture that. Maybe we don't. According to some folks, we don't need to capture it because we don't need the money. I think we are gonna need the money. The problem is, it's gonna go into these volumetric rates. And when we go into a drought, we're gonna want everybody to cut way back on their water, which means that the rates are gonna be really, really unstable. And that's gonna be a huge problem for planning for the future. So we may be able to get a new rate study that will recoup that money, but it will be very unstable. And so it may be that the board decides we have to raise them even higher so that we can have adequate reserves in case there's a next disaster and we have adequate reserves. So the rates may go way, way up on a per gallon basis, which is going to hurt low income folks, and we're gonna all be paying a lot more. So it's the reason why you want the fixed rates is because we're in this together and we're fixing things that we all benefit from no matter how much water we use. And in fact, we're not paying for the water. We're paying for the infrastructure. And so that's why we want the fixed rates to be, they're only 35% of all the rates, even in this current
Thank you.
configuration.
Bob, would you like the question reread?
Yeah.
How would you determine the most likely effects of Measure U compared to the current rate structure?
Well, with all respect to Jim and his earlier struggles with numbers, that's why I actually did the numbers, right? I mean, you can't look at the effects of the rate increase without looking at what the numbers are. Now, the numbers are very clear right here. The people that get invoices that have 4 units or less are picking up the vast majority of the increase in revenue. That's on a dollar basis as well as on a percentage basis. I actually did them both ways, Jim. So I think it's important to make sure that you're actually doing numbers when you're doing that. Now, because what I did is I went back to the 2023 invoices and I basically recalculated them for 2024 rates. That's how you figure out the impact. That was not done actually during the process. I think it would have been helpful if that had been done during the process and that information had been brought to the board and brought to the budget committee when they were doing that. Again, I want to go back and say there is no need for people to panic on this and say, oh my God, we're going to lose $1.5 million. That is not what's going to happen at all. I can't speak for the board, but I am prepared basically to put on the agenda a process to go hire Reftelis. We hired them for a small job just a couple months ago. They will certainly do the work if we pay them to basically come in with a restructured proposal to get us back to the same revenue we're at.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the audience first for being so respectful for the rest of this room that was kind of a turmoil. We've come to the end of our program. It's 8:30. And I'd like to thank the tenants for keeping us there. You guys need to clap because they came out here late at night to do that. One thing for all, you can talk to people who think you so that you learn another side of an argument, because we already have our own opinions, trying to figure out what the other opinions are. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for being such a great audience.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
No, no.